everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the Intuitive Art Show. Today, we are talking about pleasure and becoming a pleasure CEO with Christina Morassi. And first, we are going to reveal the intuitive art drawing of the week. And this is about how pleasure affects your business. So, this word, it's kind of big, it's kind of clunky, pleasure. Some people aren't really connected to it. And so I wanted to know if we applied it to our business, what would happen? If you've never done intuitive art with me before and you're interested, you can take a free class at intuitiveartacademy.com. So here we go. I did this with my eyes closed so that I wasn't aware of the colors I was picking. And honestly, when I opened my eyes, I was really surprised because there's no love in here. There's no sexuality. It's pretty cool. So the first thing I did was this spirograph of gray, which to me means intuition. So, if there's more intuition because of pleasure, that's always a good thing. And then there's this spiral of white, which is my truth color. So intuition and truth, really taken up a lot of space here. And then there's two kinds of blue. Blue for me is a healing color. And the darker the blue, the deeper the healing. This color is a little more gray. So this is intuitive healing. And then this color seems to be a parenthesis around that. So deep intuitive healing and truth. And then I thought about it. Of course, because what makes us feel pleasure is our truth. And the more truth we add to anything in our life, the better we will feel and be, and the more impact we'll have and all of that. So, Christina, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm just feeling, I've already got tingles and goosebumps listening to you. It's interesting. When you first showed it to me, I kind of had the same reaction of, those are quite plain colors when we're talking about pleasure. And when I hear the way you describe it, it's just of course. I mean, pleasure is so healing, and it can be the best GPS to our true, essence and what it wants, and the way that we can follow what's best for us in life and in business with parentheses. So I love that drawing and the analogy and the details that come through that. So thank you for sharing. I love your gifts around that.
Thanks. Yeah, I know. It was a surprise to me too. So you've had kind of a long road to this point. I mean, you've had such an amazing career trajectory. So just so the people who don't know you can get to know you, you started out doing photography for high-end fashion and entertainment. Mm-hmm. You learned a lot there. And then you became a healer, a broke healer.
A broke healer, yes.
And then you realized, okay, you want to change the world. You want to be a philanthropist. So you kind of need money for that. Mm-hmm. You became a highly successful business coach doing ecstatic branding work, which is where I met you. Mm-hmm. And why don't you take it from there? Because I think that is just fascinating.
First of all, you know the story so well. I'm honored that you've been paying attention. So that was a wild ride to transition from being a broke healer into becoming a successful business coach, and it was the business grew really quickly. I was helping women bring together all their gifts to create careers that didn't exist yet. And I called that your ecstatic brand. And, I kind of reached what I've been calling the pinnacle of, the desire for people in the coaching industry. I was doing big 3-day live events with, over 100 people from around the world, and holding high-end masterminds and, in the high 6 figures with income. And, my community and I helped to sponsor a village in Africa for 5 years as well, with building a school and having clean water and school supplies and all these different things. And, it really felt wow, I did it. I kind of can't believe I did it, but I did it. And there were so many parts of it that were amazing. And the part that wasn't was that I was exhausted. I really, all of my life force was going into the business, and it felt that, in hindsight now, it looks a little like it was kind of sucking me dry to a certain degree. And there's lots of reasons for that. Some of it's going to be, my own healing journey around my own power. But there's also such a huge piece of it of, what happens when women try to do business like men? What happens when, business is very traditionally masculine? Of course, it's all about results and metrics and money and plans and strategies and getting things done and goals. And the list goes on. And while there's nothing wrong with any of those things, they're inherently of the masculine archetype. And we are women. We're built differently. Like, we have a masculine side, but we also have a feminine side. And the feminine side, of course, doesn't really get a lot of play in a very patriarchal society. So there's feminine powers that we don't think are useful in business, but I'm here to kind of take a stand and lead a pleasure CEO movement that they are useful in business. So back to my story, I was at this pinnacle of a kind of success and impact that I was really excited by, but I was exhausted. I was drained. It felt like there was a next level to the body of work, and I just felt so empty. I also had no personal life to speak of. I'd gone through a divorce as well, and I think, I'd sort of thrown like all of that energy into the business, which not the worst thing in the world to do, but at some point it started to be very out of balance. So I knew something needed to shift. I was well aware of that. I was getting the messages, and I was attempting to kind of turn the ship slowly. But I had this machine of a successful coaching business. And, I feel like the universe, the great goddess in the sky, wasn't having it. And at some point, like, the things that were working weren't really working as much anymore. And then it meant that I was just like having to hustle even more to make things happen. And I finally was like, I'm done. I had to like come to Jesus moment. I was about to sign the contract on my next live event, and they tended to be quite expensive. And I had a launch that wasn't going as well as I'd hoped. And I finally just sat down and was like, wait a minute. Okay, something really isn't right here. So I think there's only a drastic answer here, which was to pull the plug on the business and be like, okay, I'm going into the unknown. What needs to happen? What's the next level of this work? And I need to kind of replenish and start to find a personal life for myself. So that process ended up being intense. I moved from Los Angeles to the Bay Area. I kind of, let go of my big group programs and my big live events and just started coasting with some private clients. And I started to create a pleasure makeover for myself. I knew that I needed that. So there's a lot to share on this journey, but the pieces are, I found an amazing practice called orgasmic meditation. And that really helped me to start to fill back up, to get more in touch with my sensuality, and to see the potency of a woman's sensuality and her sex power, and started to get very curious of what that looked like in business. And so eventually, a year and a half into it, which I don't think I thought it would take that long, I kind of got the download, as they say, and launched this new body of work, which is about being a pleasure CEO, for women entrepreneurs, so that we can learn how to be women in business rather than men. And how can we utilize our feminine superpowers that are inherently, of the feminine archetype of pleasure and desire and turn on and like the body and sensuality, which seem like they have no place in business, but my stand is that they do. Now, the only problem is we're so wired in a particular way, it's kind of severely going against the grain. So it takes like a whole new operating system that we need to install in order to kind of create these changes. And so that's where you find me, is like on that path of leading that charge.
Very cool. I want to talk a little bit more about the fact that you had this machine that was working and it was great and it was very man mode, very, typical business style of strategy, like you said. But then it kind of, you didn't shift fast enough. And then, great goddess, as you call her, kind of shut it down for you, or things stopped working. I experienced that myself. Like when I know that something is kind of out of alignment and I try to go forward anyway, it just doesn't work. I could do the same exact thing I did last month that made money. Yeah. It just doesn't work. Totally. And I think a lot of people are there, but they get frustrated. Maybe they don't realize they're out of alignment and they just think like they're failing. So in that moment, what would you say to people to get them to open up to this feminine way of doing it and to check in? Like, how do you teach that switch?
It's a fabulous question, and it's actually inherent in this stand that I'm taking, because what I really saw is that so many of us, first of all, are not even really comfortable with our feminine nature, our inherent feminine superpowers. And secondly, we don't even know what we want, or how to feel good. Like, all of these things that are actually our birthright are so foreign to us because they've been suppressed by, living amongst masculine values. So it's seeped in it in the patriarchal culture. So it's a place where, to me, it's like willing to be dismantled, to go into the death part of the cycle. And as a society, we don't really like that. We like birth, we like life, we don't like death so much. But all three of those are so crucial. So I did go through a death, for that year and a half, and still, I'm kind of in it to a certain degree. And it was powerful. Like, my identity got dismantled. I moved to a new city. I was in different communities. I had a certain stature in the industry, and that shifted. You go away a little bit. Like, there was a lot of death that had to go on. So I wouldn't wish it on anyone, is the only thing. And I'm sure, so many of us are just here for that path. Like, I'm sure so many of your viewers, are healers, are artists, and we just know that that's part of who we came to be. So my recommendation would be, number one, don't be afraid of being dismantled and dying. And ideally, you kind of dive right in, because the more you resist it, it's going to grab you by the neck and take you down anyway. And make some time for you to tune into your feminine nature of, like, what do you desire? Write out desire lists. Like, what does feel good to you? How could you follow your turn on, rather than your shoulds and your obligations and your to-do lists? Where do you feel the most juice and the most electricity and the most alive? And let those be, I have a friend who calls them sparkly breadcrumbs, my friend Sam Bennett, and I love that. So how can you follow the sparkly breadcrumbs of turn on and electric juice as a way to guide you to what's next, instead of operating out of, again, obligations or shoulds or what, other people think you should be doing?
Yeah. And I imagine that those sparkly breadcrumbs could lead you into doing stuff that's a little bit on your edge. Like, for me, this year I've been really called to open up more about a lot of things I don't normally talk about, like the whole galactic heritage thing and the open relationship thing, and just a lot more personal stuff. But it's working, right? And that's what people want from me. So those sparkly breadcrumbs will often lead us to our own comfort level tipping point. I'm sure for you too. I remember when you started talking about your new work, and you were a little afraid as well.
Totally. It's totally on my edge. I mean, and it's like still happens. I just shared a post about how I took a class that taught me how to give a lap dance in the middle of my launch. And, there's a lot of backstory behind that, but it was this very sacred, healing, holy experience to learn this lap dance. And I used to have judgment around stripping and things like that. But this teacher was amazing, and it was from a body of work called S Factor. And so I found it to be so empowering, so deep, and so beautiful. And so I was in a class with some entrepreneurial friends, and the way we were taught was we learned the lap dance and we gave them to each other. And, it was fascinating to be there and receive the lap dance of one of my friends that was just so turned on and so amazing. It was like there was such a nervous giggle going on. And anyway, we had some photos, and it was like, do we share these on Facebook? Can people handle this? And, we found the ones that we thought were the most appropriate. But it was interesting. My friend posted the photos first, and there were people who responded that was like, this makes me totally uncomfortable, which, is fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. And then I just shared them with my list. And interestingly, I had a colleague reach out who was going to share something I'm offering at the moment with her list. And she was like, Christina, I love you. And my list couldn't handle you talking about lap dances. That's a little bit too much of a leap for them. And it was just so fascinating to be like, And she's right. I mean, she's totally right. But of course, once you get deep into the thing you love, you forget how on the edge it is, right? So anyways, I'm still getting challenged around that of how big a stand can I take? Because I don't want to completely alienate. I want to like take a stand. And if polarization happens, I mean, that's okay. That's part of a good brand. But I also don't want to blow everyone out. So yeah, it's an interesting journey when you get pushed to your edge for sure.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's almost like, you still have to think about your audience and what they need and want from you, as opposed to just kind of, putting it all out there. That's why I actually created my new membership, just because I want to share so much more that is a little more edgy. And so just make them, come inside. And that way it's all out in the open and all good. Just like what you're doing with your Pleasure CEO. I went through the program last winter, and there is a lot of edgy stuff in there. There's stuff like BDSM and bondage and what you learn from all those things, which is obviously completely revolutionary. And it's very deep, right? Like you keep saying it's very healing and sacred. And I get that from you. And I got that in the course. So what was it like to get into all of that? Because I imagine you didn't come from like a family that was just like going to these clubs, right? Like this is a new thing.
No. Although I will say my family was not quite as shut down around sensuality as, say, the average one was. Like my mother really tried when I was growing up to be very open-minded. Like when she knew I had a boyfriend, she sat me down and talked. We got on birth control and all of that. But interestingly, it almost backfired to a certain degree because this was in the 70s, right? So she, I think, was in that like, I'm a liberated woman thing. And it was almost too much for me as a kid. Like I was quite shy, and I unfortunately remember, as a kid going to the YMCA and, there was a big changing area that was communal or there were private rooms, and I wanted to go change in the private rooms and she would shame me, which wasn't so good. Right. So it's like 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So she was more open-minded, but it did a little damage in itself. So anyway, no, that's not where I came from, but like, how did that all start to open up? I mean, I guess it was when I left New York in the fashion photography and I moved to Los Angeles. And so I became a healer and I really learned about energy. And on some level, it's like energy either flows or it doesn't. And so sex power is kind of the same thing. It's just a potent version of energy. And is it flowing or isn't it? Like, are there blocks there? And I found ecstatic dance. And I mean, I wasn't in my body at all, like in my 20s. I really had to learn that through the healing work that I received and gave, through ecstatic dance, through continuum movement, through performance art, improv. I mean, all these things, like I did a lot of work to open up my body. So I guess it was in that journey. It's a good question of just realizing and also opening up my femininity. I wasn't naturally very feminine either. I'm a strong woman, right? So it comes across often as quite masculine. So there was just a teasing apart and a learning about the beauty of the body and a learning about the beauty of energy and starting to see sensuality and sexuality as something very sacred and really just comes down to energy and the body. And embodiment, which is also something else I'm fascinated by. So it has been, a long journey. So it's good for me to remember that not everyone is at the same point, Yeah. I was with some friends recently and who have done a lot of work in this arena. And it was amazing. Like I still apparently was many steps ahead of them in my comfort level in my body. And I wouldn't have thought that, right? Like I would have thought they were up there with me. So it's just fascinating, this, unfortunately, all the shame that, the culture instills in us around the body and sensuality. So sometimes I get scared of like, what a big task this is, but I'm up for the challenge today anyway.
Nice. So one of the things that I noticed when I really started contemplating all of this and, why I don't dress up often or wear makeup often. And I kind of felt that because I'm empathic and a lot of the people who are watching are too, when we have made our appearance look more feminine, we often get negative attention. And because of the empathy, we can feel it more deeply than just like noticing someone looking at us. And once I kind of discovered that, it kind of started this journey of taking back my own sexuality and my own feminine power and deciding what I want to look like for me and not to like not make something happen outside of me. What do you think about all that and about women reclaiming their sexuality as their own and kind of stepping out of that defensive mode?
Oh, that's so good. Because here's what I've learned. If you don't own your sexuality and your sensuality, somebody else will. And that's really what's happening. So when we've gotten all that negative attention around that sensual power, we've shut it down. But that means we're kind of vacant and a bit of a vacuum around it. And so then somebody else owns it outside of us. So it seems almost like counterintuitive, that if we own more of our sensual power, then we might get more negative attention and things like that. I personally haven't found that because I know most of your audience, everyone's empathic. Like I'm sure they get some, this healing journey. So take this or leave it. But this is part of my belief system is that if I'm getting the negative feedback outside of me, I take that as an opportunity to see where is that happening inside of me? Where do I have an unconscious voice that actually feels the same way as that judgment I'm getting from the outside? So it still happens. I still have places where I'm getting that judgment. And again, I just try and look at like, where am I not comfortable with this? Because I found that if I'm comfortable with being more in my feminine power, then generally others are too. Now, it's not across the board. Every day I'm hearing about someone who's like, yeah, you kind of scare me a little bit. It's like, what can I do? It's like, I'm not that scary, but that's all right. That's their experience. And I guess the more I'm in my power, it's like, okay, that belongs to them. That's not mine. Right. So, but it is terrifying when you first start, I haven't told this story in a while, but when I was in the ecstatic dance community in Los Angeles, I would dance 3 times a week. And at the time I wore the traditional like yoga pants and a white tank top or something. And then I would see someone from the dance community outside in the world, and they would never know who I was. And it was like, are you kidding me? You see me 3 times a week? Like, well, what is going on here? And so I really got that, like, am I invisible? What's happening here? So I started to experiment with, okay, what if I wear clothing that's a little bit brighter and a little bit more feminine and a little bit more sensual? Well, then what happens? Will they see me then? And this is a little bit more of like a visibility journey, but at the same time, I feel like it's a feminine journey too, because I wasn't super comfortable with all that. I didn't used to ever wear dresses. I didn't ever used to wear makeup. I was like a total hippie healer. So this has all been a stretch for me. But I see it so part and parcel with me owning more and more of my power. Some could say it's vanity or materialism or frivolity. To me, it's like the exact opposite. As I stand more in my body, as I stand more in my power, as I own more of my femininity, like I feel more comfortable in using adornment and makeup and jewelry and clothing. And it's almost, I don't want to say like my armor, because that's not the case, but it's like, it just feels right. So it's such an interesting, again, slightly counterintuitive journey.
It's cool. Well, it's, a lot about releasing judgment, right? Like judgment that makeup is bad, or judgment that dressing up is bad. And judgment about those other, sexual ways of being, or whatever you're into, right? It's very interesting. Yeah. And I think the work that you do, I love that it's so deep, and it just goes back to, bringing you back to yourself. Like the drawing was saying, bringing you to your truth, connecting you with your intuition. And also kind of that you've kept the focus in your business. I think that's hard to do when you have such a big mission and such a big amount of elements going on in what you're trying to bring to the world, but yet you have that focus of pleasure. Was that something that developed over time, or when you got your first download, did that come in?
Are you asking like about how I use pleasure in business?
No, just about how you got the focus in your business now.
Okay, the download. I've always been fascinated by sensuality because, again, I saw that when a woman was totally in her liberated, full sensuality and power, more energy was flowing. She was like flipped, like her switch was on. Like I just saw that it was really about power and energy, pure and simple. So I have always been fascinated by that. Even when I was, an ecstatic brand business coach, sensuality was woven into the work. So it's not like that came out of the blue. But to move away from like, I help you build your launch and make money. And, that was definitely scary and continues to be on some level because I'm talking about pleasure. And I forget how much education is needed around that, right? So I guess it was more, I learned this practice called orgasmic meditation. And then the deeper story is that they have a coaching program. So, I was already a coach, but I was fascinated by the body of work behind this practice. And so I did the 6-month coaching program. So I started to understand more about orgasm as a life force energy, less about climax and more about this power that we're talking about that animates us and makes us like totally, in our vitality. And I saw that needs to fuel our businesses because so many of like my 7-figure colleagues are completely wiped out, drained, in adrenal fatigue, like exhausted. It goes on because we're running our businesses through willpower, which is sort of the traditional way of the masculine, right, in business. But I think that pleasure power trumps willpower. But we just don't know how to do it, or we don't even have access to it because we've suppressed it so much. So it was more from this place of, I don't want anyone to go through what I went through of, like getting so burnt out that, I wasn't quite burnt out, but I was definitely on the edge. Like how can we have access to that fuel that is our sensuality and our pleasure, and how can our businesses be fueled from that place? And to me, like it always comes down to like wanting to help the movement leaders like step into their power and be leaders on the global stage, right? So if you're exhausted, it ain't going to happen, right? So how can your businesses be more sustainable because you are bringing in your feminine nature alongside your masculine nature in your business? So I just was super passionate about it. Whether it was the smartest business decision, I don't know. I don't have the answer to that yet because it's interesting. Like I love the new work and I'm learning it as I'm teaching it on some level, right? Because I've discovered the rewiring of the brain goes so deep. Like I know better, but still I sit down and get like overwhelmed by my, obligations and shoulds and to-do lists, right? So I'm slowly rewiring that and I'm wanting to do business from the feminine, but I'm not even totally sure I get it 100% yet. Like, so that's why I kind of enjoy continuing to like gather the sisterhood together and create containers where we figure it out together. Like do some pleasure research, bring back your data from the field. Let's land this, as a sisterhood. So that's kind of where I'm at. And, I think I have an artist soul deep down. So it's like, this is whether it was the best business decision, who knows, jury's still out, but it's what my artist soul needed and to be in devotion to the feminine too. So I'm here.
Awesome. Gosh, so much on that. What I love is that you created a checklist, which is so masculine, right? But about adding pleasure to your business, because I do it too. I mean, I think that I have a pretty intuitively run business. I'm really checked in with myself. But I get into that serious mode too. And so Christina made a checklist of 100 different ways you can bring pleasure to your business. And it's pretty awesome. I mean, I think one of them is like, get a new tube of lipstick that you maybe wouldn't wear outside of your house. And oh my God, I will play around with lipstick in my house, but whenever I leave the house with it on, I feel so silly because it's just not my norm. So there's so many things to play around with and just add a smile to your day and kind of bring you back to that because, you know, from the energetic point of view, right, feminine is attractive. We're attracting people to us, which makes sense with the adornment and just taking care of yourself and making sure you're happy, so you're smiling and you're beaming. And then that masculine is like the pushing out, the willpower.
Mm-hmm.
So why not do it in the feminine way? Because it's going to be a lot easier and a lot happier, at least if that's what you're wanting or where your path is right now. Again, nothing wrong with the other way, but
right.
I've found the feminine to work better for me. And like we were saying before, sometimes we have no choice. You know, we're spiritual beings, and if our higher selves or our goddess doesn't want us in one direction, or we're not meant to go there, it's just not going to work. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but it's not going to work. So being able to tune in like this and really know where your desires are is so helpful. And I love that you're being honest too about like creating this as you go, and you don't have every single thing figured out yet. And it's just such a breath of fresh air, because I'm so sick too of seeing just the gosh darn gurus out there. Like, oh my goodness.
Gosh darn guru.com, I think. I like that. I know, it's funny. It's like, it's so important for us to realize where our genius lies. You know, like I finally have gotten clear, my genius lies in gathering together a sisterhood and experimenting. I'm not built to have it all figured out. Like, it's just not how I work best. I'm always about pushing the edge. And if I have to have it all figured out, I'd probably collapse. And others, maybe that is where their genius is. And that's cool too. So yeah, I mean, I do like to be, you know, as honest as I certainly can of like, this is where I'm at. And, you know, I'm not going to create an experience that will completely fix everything in your life, because on some level that's masculine too, right? Like wanting results. And the feminine is more about, let's enjoy the journey and make it all good. Right. So this is where part of like the rewiring of the brain is so important for us to keep checking back in with, you know, where is the feminine in this? And I just want to take a moment too, like, this is not about man bashing or even masculine bashing, because the ideal of, you know, I like to call when a woman is a woman in business rather than a man, she's a pleasure CEO. And it's not just trying to run a business only from your feminine, not in the slightest. The ideal is that we have an empowered feminine and an empowered masculine, and they come together into a divine union. That is the ideal. The problem is that the feminine has been so underutilized, she's almost atrophied. So we need some time to like get her up and out so that, you know, we can bring them together as equals.
Perfect. Yeah, right. Because we need that structure to really hold and contain what we're building.
Yeah.
You can't really do one or the other completely.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Awesome. So, I mean, I could talk to you forever about this. Why don't you tell us about your launch that's going on now and your program and how we can find out more?
Okay. Awesome. Well, the first place to get started is the checklist that Rachel mentioned. And I know she's going to have a link for you all somewhere around here, because I want people to sort of have a way to get their feet wet. Of, you know, for some of you, maybe pleasure in business makes perfect sense. And for some of you, it might be like, I don't get it. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then interestingly, for the ones of you it makes sense, I bet, you know, you have your own devotion to the feminine, you know of her importance, but are you using her in business? I mean, I see so many people like who have a deep devotion to the feminine, but they still operate in their masculine in business, right? So this checklist is for all of you. And it's a great place to get started with, just like Rachel mentioned, 100 simple steps like new lipstick, or, you know, using your favorite mug to make your tea, and they get a little more in depth, and there's a few edgy ones in there, but for the most part, it's super, super simple, accessible. You can get started with a bunch of them right away. So that I'd love to invite you to 100 ways to add pleasure into your business. And then I'm doing a new training workshop that's coming up very soon too. So when you go to get the checklist, you'll also get an invitation to this training. And then a recording if this is after the fact. And then also there'll be some other things coming up soon. So just kind of jump into the pool. I've got a great Facebook community called the Pleasure CEO Sisterhood. You're welcome to come join that, just come join the fray, if you will. And then the workshop is we're going to go deeper into, okay, so what does that look like to be a woman in business? And how can we unleash more of our pleasure and see how it's actually the answer to having everything that we want, like especially getting off, the hamster wheel of overwhelm and exhaustion in our business. Like I keep learning, like pleasure and desire. I mean, we're all on this journey of learning how to come home to our truth and our soul and our higher selves. And I'm telling you, pleasure and desire are actually the GPS system to help you do that. Your desires are sparks that rise up from your soul and send you in the direction of a nutrient you need. Like what better way to guide you, and then pleasure sort of shows you how you're enjoying life and fully being in the body and on the planet. I mean, to me, there's such high arts, and it's hilarious, how they often are denigrated as something simplistic. But to me, it's almost like the thing, if you will. So anyways, come in, grab the checklist, you'll get to come into the movement and the sisterhood and hear about these workshops that are coming up. Because as I mentioned, hearing about it is one thing, but putting it into action and having it be your new norm of really valuing the feminine in an especially masculine environment such as business, that takes doing. That takes being around sisters who are doing the same things. That takes putting attention on it and rewiring, day in and day out. And so I'd love to invite you to join that process with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And some things came in while you were talking about, how a lot of people in my community are like into the whole higher self integration and all that. And what is the place that we're normally stuck, right? Those lower chakras. I know you used to talk about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So this is like the practical way to do all of that, to get the benefits of doing that. And so, yeah, really cool.
Totally. I love it. I've always said that business lives in the lower chakras, right? And really, so many of us spiritual folks, we like going up and out and hanging out in the upper chakras, but we came here to be in human form, like it or not, right? So the work is almost like getting down and in and fully embodied. So when I was teaching business, it was using it as a tool to get people to that fully embodied, involuted place, right? So I love doing it in that way. And so to me, pleasure and desire takes that to the next level of seriously enjoying the human form and the flesh and the delights of, what we came here for. So yeah, this is all kind of part of this body of work around becoming a pleasure CEO. And, how can we come together as women and change the face of business, bring in this new operating system and the men have their version of an exalted form of power, but we've got our form of exalted form of power, and not many of us are in it, unfortunately. And I want us to just be like, kabam, we're here, and we're here to make incredible change on the planet, but we need all of our power. So please come in and join the process.
That was a perfect place to end. I love that. So there you have it, people. Mm-hmm. Claim all of your power and let's see what happens. This is such an exciting time. And I really look forward to seeing all of you in Christina's group. It's a pretty fun place. It's a pretty edgy place at times too. And you're really just encouraged to be yourself. So thank you, Christina. This was an absolute delight to talk to you. I'm so excited about what you're doing. And thank you for stepping up and getting out there.
Thank you, Rachel. You have always been such an incredible supporter. I've just always felt so seen by you and, felt so blessed when you were feeling the work that I was offering. And it's been a joy to walk this path with you. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the community that you were creating. And I'm honored to get to be shared with them. Thanks.
You're very welcome. Well, everybody, we'll see you next week. Thanks so much for watching the Intuitive Art Show. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for watching. If you're new to Intuitive Art and you've never done it with me, go to intuitiveartacademy.com for your free class. You'll learn how to have a conversation with your higher self in 3 easy steps. That's intuitiveartacademy.com. And if you're already a pro or you've done the free class,
and you want to learn more about creating abundance from your purpose, go to workyourpurpose.com and you'll watch a free video series all about what it takes to create a purposeful income from doing what you love. All right, enjoy, and I will see you later. Bye-bye.